Hi there. My name is Shaz Barrick, and today we are reading Pocket Taoist Wisdom. Pocket Taoist Wisdom. This is from the Shambhala Publications Incorporated out of Boulder, Colorado. Translated and edited by Thomas Cleary. Okay. The table of contents are classic sources: Daodejing, Juan Zu, Huinan Zu, Wen Zu, and then tales of inner meeting, sayings of Ancestor Lu, and then notes on the sources. It'll be about 4 to 5 hours, I believe, reading this, and then we'll do commentary either in the comment. Then we will do commentary either in the comments section or in other videos, depending on time permitting. I'm recording this off a cell phone. I set the cell phone up in front of me. Cell phones nowadays have pretty good cameras and pretty good microphones. So I think this should be good enough for what we're doing. Depending on the light behind me, I'm going to come into focus, out of focus. I like to do it with natural light when I'm here at my folks' house. I'm visiting my parents in Southern California. It's a nice time to think and talk about meditative wisdom, spirituality that approaches the philosophical, and philosophy that approaches the spiritual. So, we are going to read this book as a group. Ready? Introduction. Daodejing. The Daodejing is the most widely read of Taoist texts and the most universally accepted by followers of all Taoist orders. It has been dated variously, with estimates generally ranging from around 500 to 300 BC. Although it is conventionally attributed to Lao Tzu, a semi-legendary ancestor to Taoism, the Daodejing is evidently not an original composition by an individual author, but contains redactions of even more ancient lore. In any case, it is one of the earliest sources of Taoist theory and praxis. The present anthology includes several key selections from the classic illustrating these teachings. Juan Zu. The next great Taoist classic after the Daodejing is the equally famous Juan Zu, or Book of Master Chuang, attributed to the philosopher Chuan Zu, or Chuang Chao, circa 369 to 286 BCE. Although it elaborates on many of the ideas of the Daodejing, the Chuang Zu is very different in its transmission and manner of presentation. Whereas the former text consists of proverbs and aphorisms, the latter is largely made up of allegorical stories interspersed with philosophical discussions. The Daodejing, closely linked to ancient tradition, is attributed to a semi-legendary sage and is very difficult to place historically with precision. The Chuang Zu, on the other hand, is attributed to a clearly historical personage, and the marks of its time, during which chaos and violence of the Warring States era rose inexorably towards a climax, are quite evident in the psychological mood and philosophical attitude of the text. Huinan Zu. The next great Taoist classic after Chuang Zu is the Huinan Zu, Huinanzi, or Masters of Huinan, composed approximately 150 years later in a very different social and political climate. Centuries of civil war had ended around 200 BCE, with the founding of the monumental Han Dynasty, which was to rule China for the next 400 years, with but a brief interruption in the early part of the 1st century CE. Although the later impact of Buddhism was so great as to be immeasurable, nevertheless, the culture of the Han Dynasty left an indelible imprint, exerting a lasting influence on the development of Chinese civilization. The early emperors of Han adopted a Taoist policy of minimalist government in order to allow the nation and its people to recover from the violence and destruction of the long era of the Warring States. China had been united into an empire under the militaristic Qin dynasty in the middle of the 3rd century BCE. Taking over from the Qin, the Han dynasty attempted to restore classical culture, which had been suppressed by the Qin government in favor of a mechanical form of legalism. One of the great patrons of this revival was Liu An, a grandson of the founding Han emperor and king of a small feudal domain. Known as the King of Huinan, after the region where his fief was at one time located, Liu An opened his court to scholars and savants from all over the empire, developing it into a major center of learning and culture. According to legend, the classic Huinan Zu is a product of an inner circle of 8 Taoist sages at Liu An's court. This group of wizards is said to have appeared at court when it was already in full bloom as a seat of arts and sciences. Challenged by the king to demonstrate knowledge not already represented at his illustrious court, that 8 ancients proceeded to astound him with uncanny displays of occult powers. Duly humbled, the king of Huinan welcomed the sages and apprenticed himself to them. The Huinan Zu purports to be records of their talks. Because of the historical circumstances of its origin, the Huinan Zu contains a great deal of material related to political science and affairs of state, but it also synthesizes other aspects of Taoism, including natural and spiritual sciences. In this respect, it is the richest of the early Taoist classics. The dissemination of these teachings was inhibited, however, by 2 events: the downfall and disappearance of Liu An, the victim of intrigue, and the official adoption of a form of Confucianism as the orthodox system of thought and education throughout the empire. The brand of Confucianism that won the imperial stamp of approval was really a hybrid of Confucianism, legalism, and a peculiar cosmology that revived the ancient doctrine of divine right of kings and bestowed on it the dignity and authority of natural law. Thus, the liberal egalitarian idealism of the Taoist Huinan masters was eclipsed by the imperial ideology of political despotism and intellectual conformism. Nevertheless, the essential vitality, energy, and spirit of Taoism remained stored within its own secret reservoirs in spite of external barriers to its effective application on a large scale. As the Huinan masters themselves said, to blame the way for not working in a polluted world is like tying a unicorn down from 2 sides and yet expecting it to run 1,000 miles. The teachings of the Huinan Zu may not have had the social and political impact that could have been possible under more favorable conditions, but they retained incalculable value as a basic resource for Taoist principles and practices. Although the Huinan Zu follows the Daodejing and the Juan Zu in its fundamental understanding of human nature and life, because of the historical circumstances of its composition, it is more positive and constructive than either of its great predecessors, especially the Juan Zu. Wen Zu. Let me try to focus. Wen Zu. After the downfall of Liu An, the disappearance of the Huinan masters, and the establishment of Confucian orthodoxy in the 2nd century BCE, the classical Taoist tradition of the Daodejing, the Juan Zu, and the Huinan Zu went underground. There remained considerable private interest in Taoism among the Confucian intelligentsia, but over the course of the Han dynasty, their Taoism became mixed with superstitions and mechanical thought systems characteristic of hybrid Han Confucianism. Among Taoist purists, it is said that the so-called real people, or true Taoist adepts, went into hiding during the Han dynasty and did not re-emerge for hundreds of years. The Wenzi occupies a unique position in this complex historical context. Its compilation is attributed to a disciple of Lao Tzu, with virtually all of its contents presented as sayings of Lao Tzu himself. Although later Taoist literature includes many texts ascribed to Lao Tzu, they refer to the ancient master by honorific epithets attached to him as the apotheosized founder of Taoism, a trans-historical immortal reappearing in the world from age to age. Wen Tzu, on the other hand, uses the name Lao Tzu and Lao Tan, suggesting greater antiquity. This is reinforced by the contents of the work, which follow more closely on the classic tradition than do later texts attributed to the transcendental personalities of the founder. Non-Taoist historical evidence would seem to indicate that the text may have been compiled around 100 BCE, not long after the Huinan Zu, and later augmented to form an expanded version. Linguistic evidence also suggests an early Han Dynasty origin. The Wen Zu contains many extracts from its predecessors, the Daodejing, the Zhuangzi, and particularly the Huinan Zu. In a sense, the Wen Zu may be considered something like an early commentary on these texts, or an attempt to continue the classic tradition after its fall from political grace. In terms of format, the Wen Zu follows the Daodejing, generally abstract and timeless like its model. The Wen Zu does not include the kind of stories and illusions that make the Zhuangzi and the Huinan Zu extravagantly colorful and difficult to read. It does, nevertheless, contain many images and metaphors that are not found in the earlier texts, but are effective in illustrating and vivifying the ancient teachings. Like the Huinan Zu, its immediate predecessor, the Wen Zu embraces a wide range of related topics from physiology and health lore to social and political science. So that is the introduction to this text, Pocket Taoist Wisdom. It's going to be an overview of Taoism. I personally, Shaz Barrick, rewrote the Tao, and now I feel as I popularize my work and dig deeper into it, see if what I wrote is actually useful. I've been using it for the last couple of years, and I feel it's useful for me, useful enough for me to start sharing it. I also want to pay respect to Taoist tradition by reading up on general Taoist culture. So we're going to read this review and analyze it about other Taoist sources, Daodejing being the oldest and the one that I like. But we're going to read some of these other guys too and try to contextualize them into a greater theory of comparative religion, spirituality. How things start maybe one way and then develop over time and become something else. Different forms of morality and spirituality. All right. Let us check how this recorded and then we're on to the next chapter. Okay, the recording is going fine. So I believe we are clear to proceed. Pocket Taoist Wisdom by Cleary from the Shambhala Press out of Boulder, Colorado. Thank you, Shambhala Press. I look forward to reading what else you guys are putting out, and I suggest if you guys want to continue your own path of researching for comparative religious purposes or personal practice, they not only have Taoism. If I look at the Shambhala Pocket Library in the back, they have a bunch of other books here. So hopefully they don't mind me reading their book out loud. I'm promoting their work. You can listen to me. It's a very passive way to get this information. But if you want to dig into it, there's nothing like holding the book in your hand, dog-earing the pages, marking it up, tearing the pages out, eating them, doing whatever you need to do to process the information. But nothing replaces a book in your hand. All right, and it was cheap. How much was this? $12.95. Some of their works in the back, they have The Art of Peace, The Art of Worldly Wisdom, Become What You Are by Alan Watts. I really like that guy. The Bhagavad Gita, I've heard of that, haven't looked into it. Book of Five Rings, The Book of Tea. I think they also have the I Ching in here. They have a lot. They have Meditations by Krishnamurti. They have, I think, Marcus Aurelius in here. So it looks like they have Siddhartha, Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. They're ranging from spiritual poetry to spiritual traditions. Pretty cool. The Wisdom of the Buddha, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So Shambhala Press, thank you for putting this stuff out there. I am merely trying to be another link in the chain, try to help people analyze it now, or at least give my impression of it. And then you look at my life and who I am, and then you can see if it's something that maybe contributes to my path and could possibly contribute to your path. All right. Daodejing. Also, I might be saying a lot of these words wrong. It's okay. I'll be corrected if I am. And then we could continue. Daodejing. Carrying vitality and consciousness. Carrying vitality and consciousness, embracing them as one, can you keep them from parting? Concentrating energy, making it supple, can you be like an infant? Purifying hidden perception, can you make it flawless? Loving the people, governing the nation, can you be uncontrived? As the gate of heaven opens and closes, can you be impassive? As understanding reaches everywhere, can you be innocent? Producing and developing, producing without possessing, doing without presuming, growing without domineering. This is called mysterious power. That was called carrying vitality and consciousness. Colors. Colors blind people's eyes. Sounds deafen their ears. Flavors spoil people's palates. The chase and the hunt craze people's minds. Goods hard to get make people's actions harmful. Therefore, sages work for the core and not the eyes, leaving the latter and taking the former. That was called Colors. This one's called Attain the Climax of Emptiness. Attain the climax of emptiness. Preserve the utmost quiet. As myriad things act in concert, I thereby observe the return. Things flourish, then each returns to its root. Returning to the root is called stillness. Stillness is called return to life. Return to life is called the constant. Knowing the constant is called enlightenment. Acts at random, in ignorance of the constant, bode ill. Knowing the constant gives perspective. This perspective is impartial. Impartiality is the highest nobility. The highest nobility is divine. And the divine is the way. This way is everlasting, not endangered by physical death. That was called Attain the Climax of Emptiness. This one is called Knowing the Male. Knowing the Male. Knowing the male, keep the female. Be humble to the world. Be humble to the world. And eternal power never leaves, returning again to innocence. Knowing the white, keep the black. Be an exemplar for the world. Be an exemplar for the world. And eternal power never goes awry, returning again to infinity. Knowing the glorious, keep the ignominious. Knowing the glorious, keep the ignominious. Be open to the world. Be open to the world, and eternal power suffices, returning again to simplicity. Simplicity is lost to make instruments, which sages employ as functionaries. Therefore, the great fashioner does no splitting. We're just going to look up ignominious real quick. Make sure we know what that word means. Ignominious. Deserving or causing public disgrace or shame. Deserving or causing public disgrace or shame. I should probably open that up. That'll give me some light on my chest and brighten up this whole thing. All right. So they said that was called knowing the male. And it said, knowing the glorious, keep the ignominious, which is, I guess, public disgrace or shame. So glory would be, I guess, public praise. Knowing that, so you're keeping opposites. We're not going to get too much into the analysis. That'll be either in the text or other areas. This is just to share the information. So that way anyone seeing the videos can partake in this information. And then later on we can dissect it. And hopefully it leads you to buy your own book and support the Shambhala Press. But at the very least, wisdom should be freely accessible to all, I would think. So the way is always uncontrived. The way is always uncontrived. The way is always uncontrived, yet there's nothing it doesn't do. If lords and monarchs could keep it, all beings would evolve spontaneously. When they have evolved and want to act, I would stabilize them with nameless simplicity. Even nameless simplicity would not be wanted. By not wanting, there's calm, and the world will straighten itself. Are you starting to see how this wisdom might be applicable to the modern world? Just maybe. It's interesting, right? Return is the movement of the way. Return is the movement of the way. Return is the movement of the way. Yielding is the function of the way. All things in the world are born of being. Being is born of non-being. When the world has the way. When the world has the way, running horses are retired to manure the fields. When the world lacks the way, war horses are bred in the countryside. No crime is greater than approving of greed. No calamity is greater than discontent. No fault is greater than possessiveness. So the satisfaction of contentment is always enough. The world has a beginning. The world has a beginning. The world has a beginning. That is the mother of the world. Once you found the mother, thereby you know the child. Once you know the child, you return to keep the mother, not perishing though the body die. Close your eyes, shut your doors, and you do not toil all your life. Open your eyes, carry out your affairs. You are not saved all your life. Seeing the small is called clarity. Keeping flexible is called strength. Using the shining radiance, you return again to the light, not leaving anything to harm yourself. This is called entering the eternal. The richness of subliminal virtue. The richness of subliminal virtue. The richness of subliminal virtue is comparable to an infant. Poisonous creatures do not sting it. Wild beasts do not claw it. Predatory birds do not grab it. Its tendons are flexible, yet its grip is firm. Even while it knows not of the mating of male and female, its genitals get aroused. This is the epitome of vitality. It can cry all day without choking or getting hoarse. This is the epitome of harmony. Knowing harmony is called constancy. Knowing constancy is called clarity. Enhancing life is called propitious. The mind mastering energy is called strong. When beings climax in power, they wane. This is called being unguided. The unguided die early. So we're going to look up propitious real quick, make sure we know what that means. I do it for you guys. I, of course, know what propitious means. It means giving or indicating a good chance of success. Favorable, of course. We all know that. Favorably disposed towards someone. So what was it used in? Knowing harmony is called constancy. Knowing constancy is called clarity. Enhancing life is called propitious, or giving things a good chance of success. So a lot of this already, without analyzing, we're hearing a lot of harmony, constancy, subtleness. These are slower, lower meditations, however, whatever adjectives you want to use. It's not acquisitive. It's a warning against acquisitiveness, a warning against greed, against trying too hard. It's a way to lower the vibrations. All of that hippie talk, everything is all a part of the same family. We have one more, and the Daodejing. All right. When people are born, they are supple, and when they die, they are stiff. When trees are born, they are tender, and when they die, they are brittle. Stiffness is thus a cohort of death, flexibility a cohort of life. So when an army is strong and does not prevail, when a tree is strong, it is cut for use. So the stiff and the strong are below. The supple and the yielding are on top. Okay. These, like my favorite, personally, a little bit about Shaz, my favorite spiritual tradition is Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is what happened when Buddhism traveled to the east from India and the Fertile Crescent, I believe, traveled through China, met up with Taoism, which is what we're studying right now. So Buddhism meeting with Taoism kept traveling further and really took root in Japan. It had many names: Chan, Jen, eventually Zen is how we call it, which all just means sitting. So I like Zen Buddhism. Zen in general, you could just call it Zen, I guess, because it's the idea of spirituality through a sitting practice. You sit and you meditate, which meditation really is just sitting and observing your mind passively. And out of that, answer, spirituality, peace is supposed to come forth. And it does come forth. Otherwise, if you don't believe that peace and wisdom are from within, it has to come from without. And if you believe that, then that means you can never hope for freedom, because you'll always be beholden to the authorities from which your intellectual or spiritual traditions come. So I guess Zen Buddhism fits more into my anarchist idea that no gods, no masters. We don't really need governments. We don't really need religious teachers. What I'm doing here is showing you a path that you don't need me to follow. You can just go and do this on your own. And I don't think you need Tao either. Although this is interesting because I rewrote it, and I believe that these types of spiritual tracks help increase the plasticity of your mind, the same way that psychedelics do. So for those of us who don't want to take mushrooms or acid or increase or smoke weed, increase our creative thought that way, you can do it this way by meditating on spiritual paradoxical wisdom. And the further back you go up the river of human development to the earlier sources, I believe they're less polluted. And the Daodejing is one of the oldest sources. We're talking about a couple hundred years before Christ. So I believe some of this stuff has some really good ways to open up your mind if you meditate on it. But in the end, you don't even need this. Sit down, count your breaths slowly. Slow your breaths and count them. And that's all you need. Work up to 25 breaths, 50 breaths, 100 breaths, half an hour sitting practice. And you'll start to have your own spirituality and your own wisdom bubble up from your subconscious, from the whatever it is humans are doing over this time that we've spent on Earth, we'll continue to do. And you're a part of that story. We're all a part of that story if we're all a part of humanity. So whatever we've come up with before, you can come up with again, probably, if you listen to yourself. you might have something very important to add to this human story. I look forward to hearing it. Yeah, we're going to end this on Daodejing. I'm doing a different video for every section just in case the camera messes up. And then we're on to the Juan Zu. Okay, this is the third video in our series on pocket Taoist wisdom. Again, I'm your reader, Shaz Barrick. And I rewrote the Daodejing Shaz. It's on my website. I'll be selling that. And so now we're just paying our respect to other Taoist traditions other than the Daodejing. Make sure that we're not completely amateurs in this field. We've done a little diligence and we'll continue on to pay respects to the traditions that came before us. Juan Zu. So this is the section on Juan Zu. I like this a lot, actually. Daodejing is the one that I wrote, but when I listen to this, I like the parables, I like the stories. I'll let you judge, though. We're not going to analyze too much. We're just going to read. Small fear is fearful. Great fear is slow. In action, they are like a bolt, an arrow, in terms of their control over judgment. In stillness, they are like a prayer, a pledge, in terms of their attachment to victory. They kill like fallen winter, in the sense of daily disillusion. Their addiction to what they do is such as to be irreversible. Their satiation is like a seal, meaning that they deepen with age. The mind drawing near to death cannot bring about a restoration of positivity. Joy, anger, sadness, happiness, worry, lament, vacillation, fearfulness, volatility, indulgence, licentiousness, pretentiousness. These are like sounds issuing from hollows or moisture producing mildew. Day and night they interchange before us, yet no one knows where they sprout. Stop, stop. From morning to evening we find them. Do they arise from the same source? If not for other, there is no self. If not for self, nothing is apprehended. This is not remote, but we don't know what constitutes the cause. There seems to be a real director, but we cannot find any trace of it. Its effectiveness is already proven, but we don't see its form. It has sense, but no form. The whole body is there with all of its members, openings, and organs. With which is the self associated? Do you like any of them? That means you have selfishness therein. Then do all sometimes act as servants? As servants, are they incapable of taking care of one another? Do they alternate as ruler and subject? Evidently, there is a real ruler existing therein. The matter of whether or not we gain a sense of it does not increase or decrease its reality. Once we have taken on a definite form, we do not lose it until death. We oppose things, yet also follow them. We violate things, yet also submit to them. That activity is all like a galloping horse, that no one can stop. Isn't it pitiful? We work all our lives without seeing it accomplish anything. We wearily work to exhaustion without even knowing what it all goes back to. How can we not be sad about this? People may say at least it isn't death, but what health is that? As the physical constitution changes, so does the mind. How can this not be considered a great sorrow? Once, a butcher was cutting up an ox for the king. As he felt with his hand, leaned in with his shoulder, stepped in and bent a knee to it, the carcass fell apart with a peculiar sound as he played his cleaver. The king, expressing admiration, said to the butcher, "Good. It seems that this is a consummation of technique. The butcher put down his cleaver and replied, "What I like is the way, which is more advanced than technique. But I will present something of technique. When I first began to cut up an ox, all I saw was an ox. Even after 3 years, I still had not seen a whole ox. Now I meet it with spirit rather than look at it with my eyes. When sensory knowledge stops, then the spirit is ready to act. Going by the natural pattern, I separate the joints, following the main apertures according to the nature of its formation. I have never even cut into a mass of gristle, much less a large bone. A good butcher changes cleavers every year because of damage. A mediocre butcher changes cleavers every month because of breakage. I've had this cleaver for 19 years now, and it has cut up thousands of oxen, yet its blade is as though it has newly come from the whetstone." Yan Hui asked Confucius, "May I hear about mental fasting?" Confucius replied, "You unify your will. Hear with the mind instead of the ears. Hear with the energy instead of the mind. Hearing stops at the ears. The mind stops at contact. But energy is that which is empty and responsive to others. The way gathers in emptiness. Emptiness is mental fasting." Yan Hui said, The reason I haven't been able to, master, Yan Hui said, "The reason I haven't been able to master this is because I consider myself really me. If I could master this, I wouldn't exist. Could that be called emptiness?" Confucius said, "That's all there is to it. I tell you, you can go into the political arena without being moved by repute. If you are heard, then speak. If not, then stop. Let there be no dogma, no drastic measures. Remain consistent and abide by necessity. Then you'll be close. It's easy to obliterate tracks, hard to not walk on the ground. It's easy to use falsehood in working for people. It is hard to use falsehood in working for nature. I've heard of flying with wings. I've never heard of flying without wings." Helicopter. No, they have blades, so still helicopter. All right, Shaz. "I have heard of knowing without knowledge. I've never heard of knowing without knowledge. For those who gaze into space, the empty room produces white light. Auspicious signs hover in stillness. But if one does not stay here, that is called galloping even while sitting. If you have your ears and eyes penetrate inwardly and are detached from conceptual knowledge, then even if ghosts and spirits come after you, they will stop. How much the more will people?" Hui Zu said to Juan Zu, "I have a gigantic tree, but its trunk is too gnarled for the plumb line, and its branches too twisted for the ruler. Even if it were set in the middle of the road, carpenters would pay no attention to it. What you say is similarly grandiose, but useless, rejected by everyone alike." Chuang Tzu replied, "Have you not seen a wild cat? It lowers itself close to the ground to watch for careless prey. It leaps this way and that, light and low, but then gets caught in a trap and dies. A yak, on the other hand, is enormous. It can do big things, but cannot catch a rat. Now you have a huge tree and worry that it is useless. Why not plant it in the vast plain of the homeland of nothing whatsoever, roaming in effortlessly by its side and sleeping in freedom beneath it? The reason it does not fall to the axe and no one injures it is that it cannot be exploited. So what's the trouble? So in particular, I like that last story, but I like them all. It's a little tough when he says, stop, blah, blah, blah. It's a little poetic. It's definitely different than the first, the aphorisms and the phrases. And that's why I rewrote the Daodejing. Well, it's just happenstance. I was at a period in my life where I was seeking out wisdom. I grabbed an early source of wisdom and decided to put it in my own words. So the Daodejing, but the Dao, I'm glad I got the Dao because it's just aphorisms and very, very pure paradoxical wisdom, which I feel is better for opening up the plasticity of your mind. Now we're getting into Juan Zu, which is, I said I wasn't going to analyze, but whatever, this is commentary. Because this is what I feel. I want to say what I feel when I feel it. Yeah, now we get into stories between human beings. So now these aren't just anonymous, faceless, like let's go back to one of the ones in the Daodejing. Return is the movement of the way. I don't even think I changed this one. Some of them, if they fit my structure of 17 syllables, I kept them. Return is the movement of the way. Yielding is a function of the way. All things in the world are born of being. Being is born of non-being. That's very nice paradoxical wisdom. Being is born of non-being. You meditate on stuff like that, it's a lot like this is another reason why I like Zen Buddhism. What is the sound of one hand clapping? If the tree falls in the forest. There's this one where this man is running to the edge of a cliff, being chased by a tiger. He sees some vines, he lowers himself down the vines, and then he's waiting for the tiger to leave when he sees a rat above him gnawing on the vine. So now he's on the edge of a cliff, he's about to fall off. No, he's on a vine, and a rat is about to cut the vine and drop him. And then he sees a strawberry growing out of the side of the cliff. And he plucks it, and then he eats it, and he says, delicious. So all of this stuff you're not really supposed to analyze. You just, they're like the thoughts in your mind. You observe them. And I believe they open up the plasticity. That's what neuroscience would call it. The subconscious, most of what we're operating on is on the subconscious level. They say consciousness, maybe 5% of your actions are attributed to conscious decision or willpower. We're operating on autopilot. So if you want to really check that programming that is in the background, making most of your assumptive decisions, that's why you slow down. And that's also why you develop practices, spiritual practices, to really check what you believe and reinforce it. All in my study of comparative religion, they contain at their highest forms paradoxical wisdom, which I think break your mind open a little bit, get you in a trance-like state. Now, the second one we just read, Juan Zu, I like it. So that first one is nice because it's that pure paradoxical wisdom. But the second one is cool because now we're people talking to people. And this is more like the Zen Buddhist tradition. So a lot of Zen stories are like this, especially the last story, revealing wisdom through dialogue. And it's not going to be wisdom that's easy to pinpoint. It's going to be a lot of the Zen stories don't seem like they have a point, which I believe is the point. There isn't a point in the traditional sense from what I've gathered. I have an opinion, you have an opinion, anyone can have an opinion. You read them, you meditate on them. If your mind opens up and you receive peace, then they're working. But I don't really think that we have to analyze why. I don't think that's the purpose. So definitely the harder you grasp the sand, the more it slips through your fingers. The harder you try to understand these types of sayings or stories, the less you're going to get at the original intent, I believe. You just let them wash over you. You say them. There'll be some cleverness in there. It's not the cleverness, though. It's the patterns. Natural patterns. It's what the effect it has on your mind. And that's, when I read these stories, this little section, I liked it. I liked the effect. The contentedness of that last story where he says, the reason it does not fall to the axe and no one injures it is that it cannot be exploited. So what's the trouble? Like, where is his disagreement with it? Well, there isn't a disagreement. There's clarification between two masters. And he uses the term freedom. This type of wisdom that comes from within with so much gentleness and sincerity without external authority, that's the definition of freedom. No gods, no masters. That's why this dovetails so nicely with anarchism. There's a fallacy that if you're going to reject all authority, you have to reject all spirituality. But some spirituality doesn't depend on authority. And so maybe those are the sincere human expressions which have been corrupted by power structures over the years. And maybe it starts off like this. Sitting wisdom that comes out of your subconscious comes out of sincere human expression. But once we bring it out into this world, it gets corrupted by greed, by power, by envy, by all of the lower human nature. It's funny, I say lower vibrations when I mean calming energy, which I like. Then I say lower human energy, which is another negative connotation. So yeah, it's hard to speak in dichotomy, speak in good and bad, right and wrong. We try to avoid that. It's more about sincere human expression. That's what one of these sayings, where was it at? That's where you know it works when you refer back to it. I wrote the Daodejing, I rewrote it in 2018, now it's 2020. But for the last 2 years, I've referred back to it in my writing and my personal life. When I'm talking to someone, I'll pull up my website, I'll say, oh, you know what, well, what do you think about this? So that's how I know I have something, because it's becoming my own resource, my own source of authority for my spiritual beliefs. But that being said, I just forgot what I was going to refer to. Oh, yes. It is easy to use falsehood. I'm looking for it. I can't find it, but it's in either this video or the last video. It is easy to use falsehood in the promotion of people, but it's hard to use falsehood in the promotion of nature. There's this idea of what is natural and what is sincere. Sincere human expression and natural. That's the greater set. That is reality. That is a larger set. And then artificiality is the stuff we create out of that natural, mixed with our own will or intention. So yeah, I think that's the path that we're on, is exploring what it means to have sincere human expression. And when you look into these older wisdom traditions, you start to see more fruit and less husk. Fruit is the stuff that we eat, the stuff that's nutritious to us. Husk is just the wrappings. And it seems like the more chefs in the kitchen, the more generations and desire to control others and possible corruptions happen. You get more husk and less fruit. Until you have religions that might have some nice little kernels of wisdom, of sincere human expression, or really cool paradoxical wisdom aphorisms that help open up your mind, maybe help you transmute your emotions from the negative to the more positive. Jesus turning the water into the wine might have just been a metaphor for transmuting negative emotions into positive ones. That's what spirituality has the power to do. That's what meditation has the power to do. Meditate on the worst events that can happen in your life, on your sorrow, on your anger, and it will turn into something else. Meditation plus time equals wisdom. But you're not actively doing anything. You're just allowing the natural process to happen. You cut yourself open in your hand, it's going to heal. It could get infected. Of course, you could lose a hand. But if the natural process goes as intended, whatever cut will heal over, and maybe you have a scar, but it will close itself. Same thing with our emotional wounds. But the way that we tend to an emotional wound is different than, well, it might be the same as we attend to a physical wound. Rest and relaxation. But the emotional definitely is benefited from meditation, from sitting and getting out of the way of that natural process. And that's where these spiritual traditions help out. So we are going to continue. Juan Zu. Now we're on to the third of the Taoist texts, Juan Zu. Again, my name is Shaz Barbaric, and this is Pocket Taoist Wisdom, reading this from my parents' house in Southern California. Juan Zu. Heaven is calm and clear. Earth is stable and peaceful. Beings who lose these qualities die, while those who emulate them live. Calm spaciousness is the house of spiritual light. Open selflessness is the abode of the way. Therefore, there are those who seek it outwardly and lose it inwardly, and there are those who safeguard it inwardly and gain it outwardly. The way of heaven and earth is enormously vast, yet it still moderates its manifestation of glory and is sparing of its spiritual light. How then could human eyes and ears work perpetually without rest? How could the vital spirit be forever rushing around without becoming exhausted? Don't be surprised, don't be startled. All things will arrange themselves. Don't cause a disturbance, don't exert pressure. All things will clarify themselves. Human nature is developed by profound serenity and lightness. Virtue is developed by harmonious joy and open selflessness. When externals do not confuse you inwardly, your nature finds the condition that suits it. When your nature does not disturb harmony, virtue rests in its place. If you can get through life in the world by developing your nature and embrace virtue to the end of your years, it can be said that you are able to embody the Tao. If so, there will be no thrombosis or stagnation in your blood vessels, no depressing, stifling energy in your organs. Calamity and fortune will not be able to disturb you. Censure and praise will not be able to affect you. Therefore, you can reach the ultimate. When the mind neither sorrows nor delights, that is supreme attainment of virtue. To succeed without changing is supreme attainment of calm. To be unburdened by habitual desires is supreme attainment of emptiness. To have no likes and dislikes is supreme attainment of equanimity. Not getting mixed up with things is supreme attainment of purity. Those who can accomplish these 5 things reach spiritual illumination. Those who reach spiritual illumination are those who attain the inward. Therefore, when you master the outward by means of the inward, all affairs are unspoiled. If you can attain this within, then you can attain it outwardly. When you attain it within, your internal organs are peaceful and your thoughts are calm. Your muscles are strong. Your eyes and ears are alert and clear. You have accurate perceptions and understanding. You are firm and strong without snapping. In a small domain, you are not cramped. In a large domain, you are not careless. Your soul is not excited. Your spirit is not disturbed. Serene and aloof, you are the toughest in the world. Sensitive and responsive, when pressed, you can move, infinitely calm and inscrutable. Human nature is generally such that it likes tranquility and dislikes anxiety. It likes leisure and dislikes toil. When the mind is always desireless, this can be called tranquility. When the body is always unoccupied, this can be called leisure. If you set your mind free in tranquility and relinquish your body in leisure, thereby to await the direction of nature, spontaneously happy within and free from hurry without, even the magnitude of the universe cannot change you at all. Even should the sun and moon be eclipsed, that does not dampen your will. Then you are as if noble, even if lowly, and you are as if rich, even if poor. When the spirit controls the body obeys. When the body overrules the spirit is exhausted. Although intelligence is useful, it needs to be returned to the spirit. This is called the great harmony. The mind is the ruler of the body, while the spirit is the treasure of the mind. When the body is worked without rest, it collapses. When the spirit is used without cease, it becomes exhausted. Sages value and respect them and do not dare to be excessive. Sages respond to being by non-being, unfailingly finding out the inner pattern. They receive fullness by emptiness, unfailingly finding out the measure. They live out their lives with calm joy and empty tranquility. Therefore, they are not too distant from anything and not too close to anything. What sages learn is to return to their nature, to the beginning, and let the mind travel freely in openness. What developed people learn is to link their nature to vast emptiness and become aware of the silent infinite. The learning of ordinary worldlings is otherwise. They grasp at virtues and constrict their nature, inwardly worrying about their physical organs while outwardly belaboring their eyes and their ears. Sages send the spirit to the storehouse of awareness and return to the beginning of myriad things. They look at the formless, listen to the soundless. In the midst of profound darkness, they alone see light. In the midst of silent vastness, they alone have illumination. When the perceptions are clear, with profound discernment free from seductive longings, and energy and will are open and calm, serenely joyful and free from habitual desires, then the internal organs are settled, full of energy, do not leak out. The vital spirit preserves the physical body inwardly and does not go outside. Then it is not difficult to see the precedents of the past and the aftermath of the future. Outwardly, go along with the flow, while inwardly, keep to your true self, to your true nature. Then your eyes and ears will not be dazzled, your thoughts will not be confused, while the spirit within you will expand greatly to roam in the realm of absolute purity. When the spiritual light is stored in formlessness, vitality and energy return to perfect reality. Then the eyes are clear, but not used for looking. The ears are sharp, but not used for listening. The mind is expanded, but not used for thinking. When vitality passes into the eyes, the vision is clear. When it is in the ears, the hearing is sharp. When it is in the mouth, speech is accurate. And when it gathers in the mind, thought is penetrating. The energy of heaven is the higher soul. The energy of the earth is the lower soul. Return them to the mystic chamber, so each is in its place. Keep watch over them and do not lose them. You will be connected to absolute unity above, and the vitality of absolute unity is connected to heaven. There are countless sights, sounds, and flavors, rarities from distant lands, oddities and curiosities that can change the aim of the mind, destabilize the vital spirit, and disturb the circulation of energy. The vital spirit belongs to heaven, the physical body belongs to earth. When the vital spirit goes home and the physical body returns to its origin, where then is the self? We'll read that last paragraph again. The vital spirit belongs to heaven, the physical body belongs to earth. When the vital spirit goes home and the physical body returns to its origin, where then is the self? So I like that they did the introduction discussing the different origins. First it goes Daodejing, then the Juan Zu, then the Huinan Zu, and then we're going to read the Wen Zu and the teachings of Master Lao. So since as good anthropologists of religion, they laid them out chronologically. So we got the earlier ones and now we're getting the later ones. And they also acknowledge that these might be influenced by social forces during the time, which were empires fighting empires, which I would argue we're stuck in that pattern nowadays. Only we have one empire, the American empire, enforcing its will on the world to good and bad effect. So I can notice some, I don't want to be arrogant enough to call it corruptions, but there's a reason why I feel very lucky to have come across the Daodejing and rewrote that, and that's probably where I'm going to leave my interaction with the Tao. After that, I'm continuing a meditative practice, which I've started, which is breathing slowly and counting my breaths. It's very simple. It might be similar to Buddhism. I do some yoga, so I do physical practices, which just allow me to sit longer. Martial arts were started, in this tradition in order to strengthen the body, to be able to sit longer, meditate longer, go deeper within your own mind. So I've noticed since doing the yoga the last couple of years, I've been able to sit longer with less discomfort. There's other benefits to it. You do feel stronger. It's a way to work out your body, but getting the mind right is the priority. And I believe the Daodejing is enough for me for that. So these other, the author of this book said that these other paths, including the one we just read, help clarify it. I would disagree. That would be a hard disagree for me. They're interesting. I like some of the things they say, but I feel that they add more confusion than clarity. I really do feel like, but this goes into my criticism of society in general and all of human history, is we power structures have corrupted our wisdom traditions very evidently. And he acknowledges this in the fighting between empires. So therefore, when you have Christianity, you have Romans 13, which states, obey the government, pay your taxes. I don't think Jesus put that in there, or any of the disciples. I think a government put that in there. Obey the government, pay your taxes. And it's actually, you see how the monks were translating the Bible or copying before they had the printing press by hand. You see copies without that verse, and then up to around, I think, 1200 or something. All of a sudden, no, I just pulled that out my ass. But there's a time when they inserted that verse in there, where it wasn't there before. They did that with some of the descriptions of Jesus as well. So there is documented evidence of corrupting the Bible by the power traditions that took it into their custody in order to reproduce it. So I feel that the same could have happened with any of these wisdom traditions. One of the red flags here are the second to last paragraph, where it states, there are countless sights, sounds, flavors, rarities from distant lands, oddities and curiosities that can change the aim of the mind, destabilize the vital spirit, disturb the circulation and energy. So that's a warning of the other. So this is a culture closing now, not universal human wisdom anymore. Now it's saying that there's some people out there who might distract you, who might have ideas that might corrupt you. That doesn't seem like a wisdom tradition type speech. That's more of a nationalistic speech, a culturally biased advice. And then also, I don't like, this is kind of like modern forms of Christianity, how they start bringing medicine into it. A specific, now we're not just talking about wisdom in order to help your mind think better, feeling that if your mind is better, the whole body is that better. They get into specific promises if you follow their particular brand of wisdom tradition. So you can tell that this is getting into sectarianism, different brands of Tao. Because he says right here, if you listen to me, what does he say? No thrombosis or stagnation in your blood vessels, no depressing, stifling energy in your organs. So we're getting close to miracle healing through spirituality, which, placebo effect or non, if you do unify your sincere being into a natural expression and clarify your mind, I don't disagree. There might be a host of physical benefits, but I think it's arrogant to specifically say which benefits you're going to get. Like, this will lower your blood pressure. This will, meditation actually obviously will just calm you down and lower your circulatory system. But when he says, I don't know, it's starting to toe that line, and I've seen enough spiritual healing fallacies or con artists in my day to be let's stick with the mental stuff, trusting that the healthier you are mentally, it will carry over into your physical life. But we don't have to be specific about how it's going to carry over. Let's leave the actual physical diagnoses to the doctors and the people. Let's trust science for the physical stuff. This is more just to get your head right. If you have, because if your head is right, then you should be able to take the counsel of the medical providers, take the good and leave the bad. Because there is some very bad biases with modern medicine as well. But if you have a spiritual practice and you have a meditative practice, I would imagine that you could divine the good in what they're saying, which aligns with your own. If you see the way broadly, you start to see it in all paths. Or what is that quote? If you see the way, you start to see it broadly in everything. So I think if you meditate on that early stuff, the stuff that keeps your mind plastic and creative and open, then you should be able to take the good and leave the bad from the other specialists. Whereas if you put too much physical emphasis on your spiritual practice, that might close you off to some of the wisdom of the specialist. Where you say, oh, you know what, I'm going to lose my foot because of diabetes, but the Juan Zu said that if I just get my mind right, then it's going to clear up all my blood vessels. It's like, no, you might still need to listen to the doctor about your diabetes. So stuff like that. We don't want to. So I'm starting to see. And then in the other one, I liked the Chuang Tzu. I liked the dialogue, but I started that they started to even bring up the body. Whereas in the Daodejing, we were talking more removed. And the Daodejing goes back further. So the Daodejing itself probably was very pure wisdom aphorisms that were, by the time they wrote it down, were definitely corrupted. Because there's things, that's why I rewrote it. There's things that I kind of took out. I try to make it in my form. It's 17 syllables each section, and it's tries to be as vague and generalized as possible and not specific. Whereas the Chuang Tzu, I noticed, he conjures up a body from nothing. He starts to say that, acknowledge the what is it, the consciousness, the fact that we're conscious and we have a body, and then he gives it a definite form, and then he starts talking about death. So that's another thing. We're talking about curing illness, and we're talking about curing the fear of death, where it's one of those things where more words is actually less. Whereas what helped me, because if spirituality, if whatever your path is, whatever your belief system is, if it doesn't help you with the fear of death, which is one of our primal urges, is the fact that you are going to die, we all are. And then you have sex drive. So your death drive and your sex drive, I believe psychologists are in agreement with this. Those are very strong urges, if not the strongest. To procreate, that's one way to surpass death, is to leave children. But other way, intellectually, is to tie into a wisdom tradition, a universal wisdom tradition. So I believe it's less, see, this is hard without comparing, but Christianity and the promise of an afterlife never really worked for me. Because if you just do the thought experiment, well, if there's a hell, and if there's at least one person going there, I want to be with that person. So if you have deep, deep love and compassion, the whole Christian reward punishment theory of morality doesn't work for you. Because universal morality, the highest form, you have a deep love for everyone. And you want to, yeah, people deserve punishment and stuff, but you believe inherently people are good. And even if someone did bad, punish them, but forever, eternity, it goes against the highest form of compassion a human being can have. So hell and heaven is inconsistent, I believe, with higher forms of morality. So you need another way to tie into an idea of the universal to give you peace with the fact that your life might be so short in this world that goes on so long. And for me, all I needed was to understand or believe that there's universal human character, that there's a sincere expression of how humans can be and have been through eternity. And so if you act in accordance with that, you're acting in accordance with this human thing we're all doing. And that gave me peace, at least. So you tie yourself into the infinite from which you were born, your inheritance. And that's actually my version of the Tao. So those are my words. But you tie yourself back into the infinite from which you were born. It's also your inheritance. So your inheritance is the peace to be able to accept your death, feeling that you're tied into a story of the infinite. And so you just, by being your natural expression, you're a part of something greater than yourself. I think that's all you need. You don't need them to come after and say, well, but also if you meditate, you're going to cure your illnesses. And also now there's a heaven. Now that we're talking about heaven and hell in these later ones. Well, they're not talking about hell, but they're saying heaven, this and that. I don't think we need to personify our gods or substantiate our heavens. That's my anarchist instinct. Let's not make these things too specific, lest they be yielded as tools against us. So, sincerity and honesty towards truth comes from within. Sit with yourself. You too will tap into that peace which will allow you to face any burden that this life can throw at you. And that's the Marcus Aurelius idea, that there's nothing in nature that man isn't formed by nature to bear. There's no burden that man isn't formed by nature to bear. But you have to tap into your nature. And so that's why these earlier wisdom traditions are doing that. They're speaking about tapping into your nature before all of the craziness. All right, we're going to go on to the Wen Zu now. The Wen Zu. The Wen Zu. Hi there, my name is Shaz Bar Barak, S.B. Barak. This is the Pocket Taoist Wisdom. We're doing a little homework on a tradition which I have used personally in my life over the last couple of years. This is the liturgy, or like the written practice of my spirituality, also Zen Buddhism. And then the actual practice is sitting with myself. It takes about a half an hour to do 50 breaths. I breathe very slow. I'll give you an example right here. Example of Shaz. Usually I sit cross-legged. Let's see if I can do that in this chair. Almost. The leg doesn't want to come up. Okay, we'll do one leg. I'll do 5, just to give you an idea of the space, the time. Then you pause at the top. You don't hold it for an uncomfortable amount of time. You hold it until discomfort starts to appear. Because if you hold it too long, then your breaths become shallow. So you hold it long enough so the subsequent breath isn't shallow. I spoke too much, I messed it up. But basically, breathe very slow in. Pause to the point of discomfort, but not past it. And then breathe very slow out. Pause again to the point of discomfort, not past it. You know you're doing it right because your breathing is slowing. So you breathe very slow in, very slow out. If you're going too slow to the point of discomfort, your next breath is going to be shallow to catch up. So if you pause too long, you're going to gasp. So you want to make sure every breath is slower or as slow as the last. And what you're doing is you're slowing everything down. Also, when you breathe in more. Expanding the lungs. And then when you breathe out more. So every breath is slower, every breath is deeper. I don't know the science behind it, but it changes how your mind works. I've done many psychedelics in my day. Different types of cactuses, mushrooms, acid, different types of acid, different amounts. This is the closest I've gotten physically to the ideas I get on those. I know there's other breathing methods, hard breathing, other people have recommended. I'm not trying to follow a tradition right now. All I'm trying to do is very simple. Practice breathing. We breathe every day. We breathe every moment we're alive. We're in an inhale or an exhale. When you're talking to someone you like and you're speaking, you're actually getting your breath in rhythm to take in their pheromones. You'll listen to your cadences are starting to get into pitch. Your breathing is starting to get into pitch. Breath is at the basis. If you want to delay your orgasm, guys, a little tip is to listen to your breath. Pay attention to your breath. That's how you can control. Shallow breathing is at the height of climax. Slow that down. It's going to help you control a lot more of the rest of your body. When you're under physical duress, when you're in an emotional state, are you taking shallow breaths? Are you taking deep belly breaths? It's going to calm you down. This practice has been about 4 or 5 months now. I just practicing breathing. Deep your breaths, slower breaths. So right now, 50 takes me about 30 minutes. I want to try for 100. It takes patience too, so you're practicing also mental strength to sit there and not do anything. Don't think about anything. While you're giving yourself the task of practicing breathing and your whole mind empties out, you start losing count of the numbers because you're concentrating on the breaths. You enter this type of meditative trance-like state. And then what I noticed too is that now since then, when I've had disagreements with people, heated discussions, emotional discussions, I become aware of my breath. And I've started, one time I was in a conversation, an unpleasant conversation with a lady about money. And I started counting my breaths and slowing them down. And I felt like it helped ground me in this conversation where there was a lot of emotions being thrown out. So that way I could be more clear in my mind. So yeah, mentally, I believe the breathing practice helps a lot. And then also physically, I feel like my lungs are actually expanding. My breaths are slower naturally now. It's an interesting, yoga's interesting, lifting weights is interesting, of course. We all want to be bigger, stronger. But I never really realized until recently how important it is just to practice breathing. Even right now when I talk a little different now. I'm more aware of my breath, aware of when I bring it in and when I bring it out. It's interesting. It's almost like during the meditation, I'm trying to make it subconscious. So that way I'm just really in this meditative state where I'm not conscious and I'm really zoned out. But then now in regular life, when I wasn't aware of my breathing, I'm becoming more aware. So what was subconscious is becoming more conscious. And then it's like I'm combining worlds. Going into my subconscious that way, by willfully sitting, but then releasing the will and just allowing the natural human expression to come up without interference of physical movement or thoughts. The thoughts pass by like clouds, but you don't pay attention to them. As little attention as you have to, but you watch the leaves float down the river. You're not going to stop them, but they're just going to happen. And you're going to, that's what earlier it said, you hear, but you don't hear. Passive listening. Noises are happening, but you're slowing down the brain's desire to react to the noises until actually you don't even notice them anymore. So yeah, it's an interesting state to play with, the plasticity of your mind and the conscious and the subconscious. Breathing is one of those ways, and spiritual wisdom is another way. I say all that to say that I believe that that's the basis, sitting with yourself and breathing. And all of this stuff, we're just gathering more now. We're learning, we're paying respect to the traditions that came before. We're learning about the culture. We're finding, now that you have that foundation of sincere human expression, which is yourself just sitting down, breathing, observing your mind, add all this on top of it. But this isn't the foundation. That's when you become a sectarian, a dogmatist, when you believe people's interpretations of the truth are the truth. The truth comes from within. Anything that's true is born in you. It has to be. Anything I tell you, you have to see it for yourself, or else it'll just be what Shaz believes and what Shaz says. So sit with yourself. Allow your own wisdom, your own strength to come up. And then nothing can shake you. You become unshakable. And then we add all of this other stuff in, which clarifies our own path. I guess that's what I wanted to frame this as. These are just wisdom traditions to clarify your own path. They're not a replacement for your own path. Lao Tzu said, this is a Wen Tzu. Lao Tzu said, consider the world light, and the spirit is not burdened. Considered myriad things slight, and the mind is not confused. Consider life and death equal, and the intellect is not afraid. Consider change as sameness, and clarity is not obscured. Perfected people lean on a pillar that is never shaken, travel a road that is never blocked, are endowed from a resource that is never exhausted, and learn from a teacher that never dies. They are successful in whatever they undertake and arrive wherever they go. Whatever they do, they embrace destiny and go along without confusion. Calamity, fortune, profit, and harm cannot trouble their minds. Those who act justly can be pressed by humanitarianism, but cannot be threatened by arms. They can be corrected by righteousness, but cannot be hooked by profit. Ideal people will die for justice and cannot be stayed by riches and rank. Those who act justly cannot be intimidated by death, Even less can those who do not act at all. Those who do not act deliberately have no burdens. Unburdened people use the world as the marker of a sundial. Above, they observe the ways of perfected people to delve deep into the meaning of the way and virtue. Below, they consider the behaviors customary in the world, which are enough to induce a feeling of shame. Not doing anything with the world is the drum announcing learning. Lao Tzu said those who are known as real people are united in essence with the way, so they have endowments, yet appear to have none. They are full, yet appear to be empty. They govern the inside, not the outside. Clear and pure, utterly plain, they do not contrive artificialities, but return to simplicity. Comprehending the fundamental, embracing the spirit, thereby they roam the route of heaven and earth, wander beyond the dust and dirt, and travel to work at non-involvement. Mechanical intelligence does not burden their minds. They watch what is not temporal and are not moved by things. Seeing the evolution of events, they keep to the source. Their attention is focused internally, and they understand calamity and fortune in the context of unity. They sit unconscious of doing anything. They walk unconscious of going anywhere. They know without learning, see without looking, succeed without striving, discern without comparing. They respond to feeling, act when pressed, and go when there is no choice, like the shining of light, like the casting of shadows. They take the way as their guide. When there is any opposition, they remain empty and open, clear and calm, and then the opposition disappears. They consider 1,000 lives as one evolution. They regard 10,000 differences as one source. They have vitality, but they do not exploit it. They have spirituality, but they do not make it labor. They keep to the simplicity of wholeness and stand in the center of the quintessential. Lao Tzu said, those whom we call sages rest peacefully in their places, according to the time, and enjoy their work as appropriate to the age. Sadness and happiness are deviations of virtue. Likes and dislikes are a burden to the mind. Joy and anger are excesses of the way. Therefore, their birth is the action of nature. Their death is a transformation of things. When still, you merge with the quality of darkness. When active, you are on the same wave as light. So mind is a master of form, spirit is the jewel of mind. When the body is worked without rest, it collapses. When vitality is used without rest, it is exhausted. Therefore, sages, heedful of this, do not dare to be excessive. They use non-being to respond to being, and are sure to find out the reason. They use emptiness to receive fullness, and are sure to find out the measure. They pass their lives in peaceful serenity and open calm, neither alienating anyone nor cleaving to anyone. Embrace virtue. Embracing virtue, they are warm and harmonious, thereby following nature, meeting with the way and being near virtue. They do not start anything for profit or initiate anything that would cause harm. Death and life cause no changes to the self, so it is called most spiritual. Death and life cause no changes in the self, so it is called most spiritual. With the spirit, anything that is sought can be found, and anything that is done can be accomplished. Lao Tzu said, rank, power, and wealth are the things people crave, but when compared to the body, they are insignificant. Therefore, sages eat enough to fill emptiness and maintain energy, and dress sufficiently to cover their bodies and keep out cold. They adjust to the real conditions and refuse to rest, not craving gain nor accumulating much. Clarifying their eyes, they do not look. Quieting their ears, they do not listen. Closing their mouths, they do not speak. Letting their minds be, they do not think. Abandoning intellectualism, they return to utter simplicity. Resting their vital spirit, they detach from knowledge. Therefore, they have no likes or dislikes. This is called great attainment. To get rid of pollution and eliminate burdens, nothing compares to never leaving the source. Then what action will not succeed? Those who know how to nurture the harmony of life cannot be hooked by profit. Those who know how to join inside and outside cannot be seduced by power. Beyond where there is no great beyond where there is no beyond is most great. Within where there is no within is most precious. If you know the great and precious, where can you go and not succeed? Lao Tzu said, "Those who practiced the way in ancient times ordered their feelings and nature and governed their mental functions, nurturing them with harmony and keeping them in proportion. Enjoying the way, they forgot about lowliness. Secure in virtue, they forgot about poverty." There was that which by nature they did not want, and since they had no desire for it, they did not get it. There was that which their hearts did not enjoy, and since they did not enjoy, they did not do it. Whatever had no benefit to essential nature, they did not allow to drag their virtues down. Whatever had no advantage for life, they did not allow to disturb harmony. They did not let themselves act or think arbitrarily, so their measures could be regarded as models for the whole world. They ate according to the size of their bellies, dressed to fit their bodies, lived in enough room to accommodate them, acted in accord with their true conditions. They considered the world extra and did not try to possess it. They left everyone and everything to themselves and did not seek profit. How could they lose their essential life because of poverty or riches, high or low social status? Those who are like this can be called able to understand and embody the way. Lao Tzu said, "The energy that people receive from nature is one in terms of the feelings of the senses toward sound, form, scent, and temperature. But the way in which it is managed differs. Some die thereby, and some live thereby. Some become exemplary people, some become petty people. The spirit is where knowledge gathers. When the spirit is clear, knowledge is illumined. Knowledge is the seat of the heart. When knowledge is objective, the heart is even." The reason people use limpid water for a mirror, not a moving stream, is that it is clear and still. Thus, when the spirit is clear and the attention is even, it is then possible to discern people's true conditions. Therefore, use of this inevitably depends on not exploiting. When a mirror is clear, dust does not dirty it. When the spirit is clear, habitual cravings do not dilute it. So if the mind goes anywhere, the spirit is there in a state of arousal. If you return it to emptiness, that will extinguish compulsive activity, so it can be at rest. This is the freedom of sages. This is why those who govern the world must realize the true condition of essence and life before they can do so. Lao Tzu said, "Sages close up together with darkness and open up together with light. Able to reach the point where there is no enjoyment, they find there is nothing they do not enjoy. Since there is nothing they do not enjoy, they reach the pinnacle of enjoyment. They use the inner to make the external enjoyable, and do not use externals to make the inner enjoyable. Therefore, they have spontaneous enjoyment in themselves, and so have their own will, which is esteemed by the world. The reason it is so is that this is essential to the world in the world's own terms. It is not up to another, but up to oneself. It is not up to anyone, but the individual. When the individual attains it, everything is included. So those who understand the logic of mental functions regard desires, cravings, likes, and dislikes as externals. Therefore, nothing delights them, nothing angers them, nothing pleases them, nothing pains them. Everything is mysteriously the same, nothing is wrong, nothing is right. So there is consistent logic for men and consistent behavior for women. They do not need authority to be noble. They do not need riches to be wealthy. They do not need strength to be powerful. They do not exploit material goods, do not crave social reputation, do not consider high social status to be safe, and do not consider low social status to be dangerous. Their body, spirit, energy, and will each abides in its proper place. The body is the house of life. Energy is the basis of life. Spirit is the controller of life. If one loses its position, all three are injured. Therefore, when the spirit is in the lead, the body follows it with beneficial results. When the body is in the lead, the spirit follows it with harmful results. Those people whose lives are gluttony and lust are tripped and blinded by power and profit, seduced and charmed by fame and status, nearly beyond human conception. When your rank is high in the world, when your vitality and spirit are depleted daily, eventually to become dissipated and not return to the body. When your rank is high in the world, then your vitality and spirit are depleted daily, eventually to become dissipated and not return to the body. If you close up inside and keep them out, they have no way to enter. For this reason, there are sometimes problems with absent-mindedness and work being forgotten. When the vitality, spirit, will, energy are calm, they fill you day by day and make you strong. When they are hyperactive, they are depleted day by day, making you old. Therefore, sages keep nurturing their spirit, making their energy gentle, making their bodies normal, and bob with the way. In this way, they keep company with the evolution of all things and respond to the changes in all events. Their sleep is dreamless, their knowledge is traceless, their action is formless, their stillness is bodiless. When they are present, it is as if they were absent. They are alive, but it is dead. But they are alive, but are as if dead. They can appear and disappear instantaneously and can employ ghosts and spirits. The capabilities of vitality and spirit elevate them to the way, causing vitality and spirit to expand to their fullest effectiveness without losing the source. Day and night, without a gap, they are like spring to living beings. This is harmonizing and producing the seasons in the heart. So the physical body may pass, but the spirit does not change. Use the unchanging to respond to changes, and there is never any limit. What changes returns to formlessness, while what does not change lives together with the universe. So what gives birth to life is not itself born. What it gives birth to is what is born. What produces change does not itself change. What it changes is what changes. This is where real people roam, the path of quintessence. Let's look up quintessence. Some of you might not know what quintessence means. Of course, I know, but let's just make sure you know. Quintessence, the most perfect or typical example of a quality or class, the aspect of something regarded as intrinsic and central, constituted of character. So quintessence is the essence, but the super essence. Like the quintessence is one of those words that is just a harder word than the smaller word inside it. It's like a super and superlative, very close. So quintessence is the aspect of something intrinsic. The path. So the Tao, they're saying the one path, the true path, the essential path. A couple things I don't like about this: the introduction of the current term real people, just like the introduction of the term in the video before, this section before the Huinan, we talked about other cultures which might corrupt us. That's a little bit of us versus them. We've seen that play out through nation states since the beginning of time, through tribes, through people, objectification of the other. So we want to be careful for that as this spiritual tradition. It comes from the sincere expression of self, facing our existential problems and claiming our inheritance which is our armor to bear the burdens of our mortality and the injustices we see daily and the suffering we see in the world, we have a natural response called spirituality, called religion. That's actually one of the arguments for God. Every one of our natural cravings has a physical counterpart. We have a hunger and we have food. We have a sex drive and we have partners. We have mates that we seek out. So that's one of the arguments for God, is that every single human culture seems to have spirituality, so there should be a physical manifestation of God. But that's the anthropomorphizing God. It could also be that we have a natural solution to our mortality, which when we calm down and we allow ourselves to listen to our natural expression, I'm saying natural a lot, but that's really the key kernel of this idea, is that man and woman, the human species, by nature contains everything within it to be happy. We don't need the power structures. You don't need your Cheetos. You don't need your American empire. You just need to sit with yourself and listen to yourself, passively though, because don't dialogue with yourself. Listen to yourself as you would watch the weather. You don't affect the weather. And if you really have peace, the weather's not going to affect you either. When you sit with yourself, you're completely safe and you're completely calm. If you have a thought that comes through your head, intrusive or whatever, it's a dark thought, a dark cloud, allow the rest of everything else to happen too. And you'll realize that dark cloud becomes a dark speck in a great blue sky. And now it's just a crow flying through the sky. It's everything. It's a jewel that's turning, a diamond that's turning, refracting light. Light's going to catch your eye, but the diamond's going to keep turning and different lights are going to catch your eye. And so just the longer I sit with myself, the more I feel like I'm seeing the totality of my being and reality around me. Passively though, because when these thoughts pass, if I try to hold on to them, I break the meditative trance-like state. So you really, and that's why you do the breathing. Physically, I'm just trying to take deeper breaths at a slower pace than the one preceding it. And by the 30th, 50th breath, they're so slow, and you feel a spiritual massage coming on. It's like someone's rubbing your shoulders. You feel whatever stress hormones, whatever is going on in your body, all that stuff is like super chill, super mellow. And that's why I related to psychedelics. The thoughts I have in deep trance-like breathing states are similar to the thoughts I have on psychedelics, which is my own evidence that's opening up the plasticity of my mind. Because that's what they're learning right now with studies with mushrooms and acid, is that they're just turning off your default mode network, that part of your brain that fixes reality into certain patterns. The adult's gone in the room, and now the kids are just drawing on the walls with crayon. So yeah, you're allowing all that subconscious stuff to bubble up, which I have a lot of faith in. That being said, this did have a lot of clarification of cool Taoist thought. So although I don't like some of the terms and some of the dogma I can tell is starting to creep into the tradition in these later texts, it is a very good commentary on Taoist thought, because it helped put it into more paragraph type structure. Whereas some of these, maybe people could read them forever and maybe they're not, like the colors one at the very beginning out of the Daodejing. Maybe some of this isn't as approachable for people. So these other texts are good as well. I know when I first read this when I was younger, I don't remember when I first came across Eastern wisdom, but I remember the distinct feeling that it was kind of BS. It's just like a passive nihilism. But once you go through life, and once you experience suffering and you experience really strong emotions, you realize that it's not nihilism. It's actually the most appropriate response to strong emotions and existential crises. Is that active reaction often isn't the best answer. That space in between where you pause, lower the emotions, and allow life to show you what's going on is often the wisest course of action. Not always. Sometimes we need a quick animalistic response to get us out of immediate danger. So I trust, but then that also goes to sincere human expression. I'm learning more and more to trust my sincere reaction. But whenever I feel I can afford it, I stop, meditate, and allow my emotions to clarify themselves. It's like why You used to put water in certain whiskeys or certain liquors. You open them up a little bit, allow them to breathe. You put them in certain cups to allow the flavors to open up. So our emotions are very strong, and doesn't hurt in most cases to open them up with a little bit of sitting practice, a little bit of meditation. Allow that subconscious part of the human experience to bubble up and have more of a presence. And that's what I love so much about the way that they put this tradition, is it's about emptiness. It's about creating space for the wisdom of reality to come in, as opposed to dominating that space with your will, which does more harm than good. That being said, sometimes you have to act decisively, in my experience in life, based off of that pure emotion. There's a reason why we get an adrenaline dump and a fight or flight. But when to use that, when to not. Unless it's life or death, usually you don't need to use that. And we're benefited from processing our emotions through these filters that I'm developing, and I hope you can develop them too. On to the next chapter. Thank you for sitting with me and entertaining this exploration of Taoist wisdom.